everybody, and welcome to Getting to Know Your Neighbor. The premise behind this is almost everybody has a neighbor. Sometimes you don't know their compelling background or their interesting story, and we want to get to know your neighbor a little bit better. Today we're talking to KGUN 9 meteorologist April Madison. April, thank you so much.
Of course.
We want to get to know April just a little bit. If you live on the far northeast side of town, April is your neighbor. Okay, I'm going to ask you a weather question first.
Okay.
Okay, probably 99 times out of 100, when you guys give a forecast, you're either close or you're right on. Every now and then you get some prediction of a big major front or storm coming in, and it just doesn't occur.
Right.
What happens when that happens?
When you say what happens weather-wise, or what do people do?
Why was it wrong? Why did it not show up when it was predicted by you and everybody?
There's a plethora of reasons why that can happen.
Without getting too technical.
Well, like for an example, and one not so long ago with Hurricane O'Neill, it ended up being no big deal. O'Neill, I don't even remember O'Neill. It split. So in other words, it still did exactly what it was forecast to do. But one thing, like in a weather phenomenon that you can't ever see happening or forecast for, is when something can split. And a front like that can literally become two, and that's exactly what it did. And so unfortunately there were still parts of southern Arizona that got hit directly by it, but it didn't end up being as catastrophic because of the fact that part of it instead just brushed Tucson instead of hitting us directly.
Oh, okay, so when you say it split, half went one way and half went the other, and so...
It literally went from 1 to 2.
Okay. All right.
And so and that can be, that's an extreme version. A more simpler version can just be, we didn't assume there would be as much cloud cover, or it didn't move out as fast as we thought it did. And clouds are one of those really easy things that can adjust your temperature by a lot. In the morning, it can make it a lot warmer, and in the afternoon, it can make it a lot colder for obvious reasons. So.
Okay, I put you on the spot right away with that question.
That's fine.
But let's just start at the beginning. Where was April born and raised?
April was born in Lawton, Oklahoma, raised in Tulsa. Okay. I don't remember Lawton because I was still a baby when we moved to Tulsa. So really when people ask me where my original home is, it's Tulsa, Oklahoma. Okay,
so that's where you went to grade school, elementary, grade school, junior high, high school?
Yep.
Okay, what did you do in high school? What kind of activities?
High school was kind of that time when I went from being, I was always social, but it took me a little while to kind of start getting used to my friends. And by high school, I'd had a lot of the same friends all through grade school. And so I was a lot more social by then. I had been doing competitive cheer since 5th grade. And so by high school, I was several years into that. And that was a big deal for me.
And cheerleading in Oklahoma, that's a big deal. I've seen those Lifetime movies where one mother sabotages another so that her daughter can make the cheer team and stuff. So that's a big deal in Oklahoma.
It is a big deal. Unfortunately, those types of things happen, and I thankfully didn't have to witness a lot of that. I have seen some pretty, I've seen it. It didn't happen on my squad, thankfully. But it's very much taken seriously, as much as football in Oklahoma or Nebraska or Texas or those big states, that it's a big deal. And so one thing that was new for me when I came here is everything's a league, and almost anyone can just go be on a team. Yeah. And in Oklahoma and Texas and a lot of those, but that's not the case with cheerleading. You have to try out and beat out several, and you have to have a lot of training, and they have to accept you because it is going to be very competitive. It is going to take up a lot of your time. And at some point, if you're good, you end up competing at the national level.
And that's what happened to you. And I imagine as a cheerleader, you were probably pretty popular in school, probably ran for class president, most likely to succeed, things of that nature, something like
Everybody had that, yes. But for me, I was kind of all over the board. I was actually voted class clown. So I was popular with the cheer, that type of, people kind of had cliques whenever I was in high school, and you were either with the band or you were with the cheer, or and I tried to be friends with everybody. And so I joked around a lot, and I didn't want to be known as like snooty or whatever, being, just as a cheerleader, because a lot of times I was the captain, and sometimes you got sort of a bad name for that. So I joked around a lot, and eventually was voted class clown for my senior year.
Well, okay, so you clowned around, plus you were serious with your cheerleading in high school.
Right.
You get out of high school, and you don't immediately decide to go off to college. You do something a little unusual.
Well, I didn't really know what I wanted to do yet. And I think I'm still trying to somewhat figure that out. I changed my mind a lot. So I decided to go tour Europe for a few years. And that was an experience. I was 18 when I got there, so it was a bit of a culture shock. And but I got to see so many things that you just don't really grasp until you see it in person. And I got to see Austria and Germany and Paris and just several different places, and then decided, okay, I probably should get serious and start, college and doing that thing.
I assume you had to save a lot of lunch money to go to Europe for 3 years?
Yes and no. Originally went over there with some friends, military. And then my dad actually headed it's a long kind of story, but he was head of a electric company that was starting up in England.
Okay.
So he was already over there, which made it easy for me to stay longer and kind of see more places.
Okay, so you do that, which had to be a great experience. But now, as you said, it's time to kind of find your path.
Right.
How did you find your way to Tucson?
So I did a few classes while I was over in Europe that I knew would be accepted at any university when I decided to do whatever it is I was going to do. And one of the places I had visited while still in Europe and came back and visited friends and whatnot was Tucson. And I just remember being over here briefly and really loving it. I loved the dry heat. I loved the desert. I loved the mountains. You don't get a lot of the mountains in Oklahoma. And I just thought, man, it'd be really cool to come back here and go to school and maybe go to the University of Arizona and everything. And so that's where that all began. So whenever I came back, whenever I decided I'm going to go back stateside, Tucson is where I wanted to be.
Okay, so now you start your career. Walk me through the beginning of what'd you do when you got to Tucson?
Well, I think you met her. I had a roommate in Oro Valley, and her name was Gabrielle Brewer, and she was one of my first really close friends. Her and Nicole Helton I met through interning at a radio station. And I thought this will be a good way to get to know people and get into venues for free. Like, you have to work it, you know what I mean? You had to be one of those people who threw out the t-shirts and put up the tents and all of that. But then a lot of times you would get to stay at the event, whether it was a concert or just whatever. And so it was a lot of fun just interning. And learning all around town. You would literally learn where everything is, and then that was a good way to meet people. And at the time, I started at the community college at Pima and was getting my general studies out of the way, and then eventually transferred to the University of Arizona.
Okay, so you started interning at a radio station, then you eventually began working.
Yes.
In the media.
Right. So as I was there interning, I got to know a lot of the DJs, you being one of them, many of them. Shannon Black, who's one of the kindest people I know. She was always really nice to me. And I decided, you know what, this might be fun. Maybe I can find some sort of way to just continue doing what I already do and getting paid for it. Like, what can I do while I'm going to school? And so I started hitting up the Gina Corral and Alan Caith duo, who was running Skyview Traffic at the time. And said, hey, I would really be interested in learning how to do traffic. And one thing led to another. Alan gave me my shot. And so I went from doing traffic on one station to I think as many as 8 at one point.
Right.
And then when there was a position in the airborne traffic department, I was allowed to apply for that and got a chance to do that as well in the afternoons.
So you were actually up in the airplane, and you were the traffic person for me as well.
Right.
When I was a long time ago on country radio. And to give you an idea how that worked, I would be down safe on the ground
in the studio,
and I would say blah 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 blah. And now let's see how our city streets are. Let's go up to our airborne traffic, April Madison, and then you would give us a report on accidents or closures or slowing and that kind of thing.
Right, yeah, because it's what they call a bird's eye view, so you can be up there and you can see, and that was a kind of like learning a new language. You have to know what you're seeing, and everything just looks like a big checkerboard or X from up there, and you have to know what each intersection. You start finding landmarks and figuring out your east, your west, your north, your south. But it's a really good reason or way to show people not only where the accident, because you now know, hey, if you're southbound on this road and you're going to be turning left, this right lane is closed, you're either going to have to stay left and it's down to this many miles of backup, and you can see it because you're up there. So your best route to get around it faster is to take this street, and because you can see them all.
Yeah.
Versus on the ground, you can guess what might be better, but up there you can literally say, you've got this many lights to get through it, or take this right, go over to this, road, and you'll get right through.
And I imagine it was a learning curve, because when you mention landmarks, for example, you may say, okay, well, there's the University of Arizona football stadium.
Right.
I know just to the north of that is Campbell Avenue.
Yep.
So you have to kind of learn those landmarks and then learn the streets surrounding them.
That's exactly how you do it. And that's where you start, is the big ones that you can point out really quickly, and then you kind of go from there.
Okay, and then I know your father and mother were pretty successful. Did they ever come to you and say, yeah, this radio thing, maybe you ought to get serious about, because a lot of parents do that when you decide to go into radio. Yeah.
Well, and you're going to school. So in the beginning, whenever I was just going to school full time, and this was, it was kind of a fun thing to do. They loved it, and then it was like, okay, but you're not making a ton of money doing this. So what are you going to do? And it's so funny you asked that, because I remember my dad asking you once when he met you. And I've always remembered this, saying, I'm a little, because you had made it a career. Yeah. And he was like, how successful can you be? And he wanted to know, if she decides to stick with this, what, is she going to be pretty successful? Don't
use me as an example, but.
And I think you may have started with that. Listen, don't use, no. But I just remember you saying to him, I've known April for a while now, and I just don't think that you have to worry about her. And I just remember thinking, I wonder why he thinks that, because in my mind, I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do, But you just very much did not fear that I wouldn't get it all figured out in due time. And so, and I think, I don't know why, but I think my dad kind of just trusted that. And so he watched me, he'd be like, well, what do you want to do next? So then it became, what do you want to do next? I'm like, I think I might try my hand at TV. And
oh, good. Okay, so he became very supportive. Now, I don't know why I said that either to your dad, because I didn't think you were quite right, because you would actually jump out of perfectly good airplanes. Not when you were doing the skyborne traffic, but just as a hobby for fun.
Let me just get a closer look here. But that's how it started. I had a buddy who jumped out of Cessnas, and I'm dropping my mic here. I had a buddy that, should we check and make sure it's still working?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. And since
it's live,
and since we used to doing that a lot, I've actually had mics drop right out
We'll see some of that here in just a little bit.
How fitting for that to happen. Yeah. So I had a buddy who jumped out of planes, and airborne traffic in a lot of cities is helicopters, choppers, and we did a Cessna. And so he's like, man, you're already halfway there. All you gotta do is jump out now, And I was like, I'll try anything once, And so and it was kind of addicting in the beginning, and I did it 3 or 4 times, and at one point even flew with my buddy to Virginia so that we could jump out from much higher and actually drop through clouds, because they only let you go from so high out in Marana, I think, and so you have to go other places if you want to
get more dangerous.
If you want to get more dangerous, So it's been many years, but that I did do that for a bit.
Okay, so you do the Skyview traffic or skyborne traffic, and then where do you move from there?
So a couple of other traffic reporters had started working a little bit in TV. And it was mainly just specific shows at the time started implementing traffic people in their morning shows.
Right.
And Alan had already been doing a live hit from the plane in the afternoons on KGUN. And he wasn't in studio, he was still in the plane, but they would go to him and you would just kind of see his picture and then you'd hear his voice, much like what I did in the afternoons on the radio stations. They decided at some point they were going to implement a traffic person for Good Morning Tucson. Okay. And I said, well, I would like to apply because that sounds like something that would be fun. So I interviewed and tried out, for better terms, for that position, and I got it. And I think it was probably a pretty easy, there were other reporters and stuff that wanted it, but they're going with somebody that already knows the town traffic like the back of her hand. I had been doing airborne traffic for 6 years, so that was probably a lot to do with it. And so I still continued to do airborne traffic in the afternoons in the plane, and then in the mornings while he was in the plane, Alan did the mornings. I went to KGUN and I was the traffic reporter, and he and I for a while would go back and forth. I would go to him in the plane and he'd come back down to me in the studio.
Well, then you kind of move on to other media as well before you settled into weather.
That's correct. So very long story short, a good friend of mine was the anchor of Good Morning Tucson. Her name was Destry Jatan. She's in Phoenix now, Midday Live. And she kind of took me in her wing and under her wing, and she was like my mentor. And I said, I really want to learn the ins and outs of being a reporter now and anchoring, and what can I do to do that? And she was like, start going out with some of the reporters, or go out with me and watch how we do these things, and start writing your own stories and building your own reel. And so I did that. And at one point I said, well, when do I get to transition and just be the reporter? And she said, you really got to leave this market, because everyone sees you as the traffic reporter. If you want to kind of reinvent yourself, you need to leave, go learn everything, one-man band, start from scratch, and then maybe come back. So that's what I did.
And that's kind of another aspect of it. A lot of people think of Tucson as kind of a jumping off point. Now, there's 1 million people or more in the metropolitan area here, but still people look, well, I'll go to Tucson and then I'll go elsewhere and get more experience or whatever, and maybe come back to Tucson, and that's what you did.
That's exactly what I did. Back whenever I was wanting to become a full-time reporter, one of the criteria with KGUN is you had to have done that particular job for at least 2 years at another market before you could be hired on full-time. So I took a job as a reporter, got my first reporter position at a station in Iowa, KTIV, and for 3 years I learned everything from, I was my own camera person, what they call the one-man band. I was my own editor. I wrote all of my own stories, and at one point I was even doing some weekend anchoring, and you have to produce the whole show in a market that size for your own show. And so I literally did everything at one point in TV except sports.
Well, and that begins to segue in. At some point, you decided to settle in on weather. How did that happen?
Well, one of the meteorologists at the station, they needed someone that could start filling in on weather so that he could start taking some vacations. And I said, I'll do it. This is my whole life has been, I'll do it. I'll try that. And so I said, teach me. And then when you're gone, I'll do weather when you're gone. And part of that was because Iowa is really cold, and I was a field reporter, so I'm like, if this is going to get me inside, which you wouldn't think weather would, but it did. And I found that I really, really enjoyed it, way more so than I thought that I would. And I think a lot of it was just not only the weather part of it that intrigued me, but it was getting me back to my roots of radio, which is all ad-libbing, and weather is ad-libbing. Whereas a reporter, you write a script, you stick to a script, unless it's like breaking news or something. Everything's written, and I'm used to just talking.
Well, it's ad-libbing once you're on the air.
Right.
But now I'm old enough to remember back when the weather map was just a big piece of cardboard and on the wall, and somebody put a magnet up there with a cloud or the sun or it's raining. But it's really sophisticated now. So you have to go in. First, walk me through your day. You have to get up really early.
Right. So my alarm goes off at 1:30 a.m. And it's so funny because our show starts at 4:30. So I'll constantly get these comments and say, hey, I get up as early as you do. I'm up at 4 every day. And I'm like, oh, bless your heart. 1:30 is when my alarm goes off. I get completely air ready, meaning I could go on air from the minute I walk into the studio. And that's because I need to spend that hour. I get to work between 3:15, 3:20-ish, sometimes 3:30 if I'm really pushing it on a non-weather day. And then I spend that hour and a half looking over the satellites, looking over my weather models, building all of my graphics. It's kind of like you're telling a story, but you're like with pictures, with a picture book. And my graphics are how I build my weather story. And I do that, and then the show starts at 4:30.
Yeah, well, you've done all your prep, and then by the time you go on the air, you're just relaying all that information that you've prepared for.
Absolutely.
Now, here's a thing that probably a lot of women will want to know the answer to this. With guys on TV put on a different color tie every day, and wow, he looks great. But you seemingly have a different outfit every day of the year. How does that
I
occur?
love that you say that, because then it tells me that I'm doing a really good job at alternating them and not too often. Because I do have now a very large closet full of work attire, but it has taken years and years to accumulate. In the beginning, you would see me wear at least one. Back when I first started, suits were still a big thing. You wear dresses now, but blazers and the skirt suits and the pantsuits, and I would have one staple gray and one staple black, and I would just change the top up or the skirt with it. Many times while I was still trying to accrue an actual, wardrobe. And so it has taken many years, but it's also part of the reason people are always like, how do you stay so fit? And it's motivating, because it's like, I have thousands and thousands of dollars worth of work clothes. I'm not gonna not fit in them. Like, so I look at it and I'm like, I'm not starting over.
Yeah.
I'll continue to stay in that dress for as long as I possibly
A
can.
whole new wardrobe is not in the future.
Nope.
Now, you talk a little bit about the seriousness of the weather. I mean, you have to go in, you have to prepare these weather maps and get ready to go on the air. And then you hope everything goes right, but it doesn't always.
Nope. Sometimes, and this is a learning experience too, things happen that you would rather didn't, or you can't, bloopers.
Yeah,
People
we call them bloopers.
We call them bloopers, and it happens. And after you've been doing it for a while, you just kind of point it out, make fun of it, and roll with it. Because I'll tell you, if you notice it, I guarantee you your viewers have noticed it, and if you try to act like it's not happening, it's worse.
Well, we found a blooper. Let's take a look.
Okay.
Yesterday, so because of that, we will still see my mic's dropping. There it goes. But you can still hear me. Oh, live TV. It's a beautiful thing. Happy Friday, everybody. We say goodbye to monsoon today and goodbye to my mic in about 8 seconds. Low 90s. Just going to drag that right on out of there. 80s next week.
Well, I guess my first question, where was that mic?
We have a, that's a good question. I'd really rather not talk about it. So everyone puts it somewhere different.
Yeah.
It just depends on what your mic pack and IFB packet, but you have to put it somewhere.
Yeah.
And so I use an elastic strap around my leg so that I can wear just about anything, because I have also an earpiece that is attached to a cord so that I can hear when my producers talk to me and tell me to shut up and that sort of thing, stop talking. And so it all has to be attached somewhere, and that elastic came undone, and so the mic went.
And that's another thing maybe viewers at home don't realize is while you're talking, there may be somebody talking in your ear, but you have to continue the flow as if that's not occurring.
As if it's not.
Yeah.
And it's pretty regular, and that's also something that you get used to, just like learning where to point on the map and know what you're actually pointing at. And then after a while, you just get used to it. And it's not that you're ignoring them, but you have to keep talking as if you're not hearing it. And so a lot of times it's just simple time cues, like they'll say 1 minute, 30 seconds, 15. And that's usually what it is. They're counting you down. But every once in a while, you'll get the, you'll get either a wrap or next video isn't ready. We're going to toss back to you. Don't go to the camera, don't go to the anchors, toss to break, and they're giving me specific instructions because something else is going wrong. And you have to just, so if you ever see me just kind of going, and repeating myself, it's because they're telling me something and I'm trying to act like it's not happening.
You're doing three things. You're talking to get the information that you need to give. You're listening because they're giving you information, and you're thinking, now I've got to ad lib.
Right.
So there's a lot going on in there. So keep that in mind.
It's multitasking.
Now, you come to Tucson. You've established yourself. You're the morning meteorologist at KGUN 9. Everybody knows who you are. It's been good to you, Tucson, and there is a stepping stone here to Tucson to go to bigger and better markets. Have you thought about that?
I have, yes. But one thing that was a little more important to me by the time I got to this level in my career, because I had done the radio and I had been a reporter and, I was older and I really wanted to start a family. And so once I did that, the idea of constantly moving up the ladder became less and less important to me. And also, where would I want to be to raise my child? Because I have a 10-year-old son now. And that started getting a little bit further and further away. I still get offers, and sometimes they do make it very hard not to at least consider.
Sure.
And I will, but so far, none of them have been so great that I go, okay, this is worth taking the chance of not only my family not being happy, but money doesn't make you happy. I mean, it certainly helps, but
I'm willing to give it a shot.
I mean, I will, it certainly helps, and there's got to be a lot of that at some point, maybe, or enough. But I really love where I live. I love the people that I work with and where I'm at and my environment. And you don't know that you're going to get that. So it's not just about money. And a lot of the places that I've been offered just these amazing deals and they've just rolled out the red carpet for me but am I going to love the people? Am I going to, and that's something you don't know. And then you kind of have to get a feel for it or a vibe. And so a lot of these interviews I've gone on, my vibe, my gut, I just had to trust told me, you're not going to like it more. And so, and I could be wrong, but that's where I don't take as many chances because I have to think about someone other than myself.
Well, you met your husband, Chris, here, and let's give him a plug. He's got a business right here in town.
Yeah, he's doing really well. It's called Window World of Tucson, and it's one of the reasons we came back. When we moved to Iowa, I had taken that reporter position. He was helping his brother run a window world there.
Okay.
So they were running it, and we had both decided, man, we really like Tucson. We'd like to go back. And at the time, there was not a window world of Tucson. And so we're like, oh, we can buy the franchise. And so that's what we did. And he runs the Tucson office here, and since '07, since we
And
came
where are
back.
they located?
On 22nd, roughly between Craycroft and Swan.
Okay, and maybe you've seen the television commercials because your husband is in, and also your 10-year-old son, Colton.
Yeah.
And they're pretty funny together.
They've got the personalities. I don't know where they get it.
Let's take a look at their commercial.
Hi, I'm Chris Lutz, owner of Window World of Tucson. Our lifetime warranty and 0% financing will start you seeing your world in a whole new way.
I'm even going to come to your home and give you a free estimate. Right, Dad?
I don't think so, but we do offer free estimates.
I don't think so.
I don't think so, but I like it. Right, Dad?
Right?
They're good. The timing on both of that is really good. Yeah, I like that. So your son could either make his way into TV like you did, or he might own a whole chain of door and window replacement
He really could
stores
do
one of
either.
these days.
You know, he's got the best of both worlds. I tell him all the time, I'm like, man, he's got more talent in his little finger than I do my whole body. At 10, I would have never even dreamed of any of this. If someone told me I was going to be doing this, I'd be like, no way. So, yeah, he's like I said, he's got the business side kind of from Dad, and the personality side from me, and he's pretty talented, and he's a lot like me, which scares me a little bit. But hopefully
Well,
that'll pay off.
TV can be a little bit of a tricky medium because people see you every day. You're in their living room every day. And nowadays, with social media, there's all kinds of ways to contact people.
Right.
And I know for the most part, you get a lot of positive reaction. I've seen it. But does anybody ever just want to call or email or whatever the social media is and just kind of be a little snippy at you?
Yeah, I've had people from the clothes I wear, they don't like my short hair, they don't like my long hair, and they love to let you know, and they look at it like, if you're going to be in TV and this is your job, then we have every right to tell you what we do and we don't like about it. And I guess, I may not agree with that. I would love to say, and I have told people, well, I'll come to your job and let you know what I think about what you're doing. But I've gotten a little more grown up with my responses, and sometimes you do have to just choose to not respond, and you gotta have tough skin.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Sometimes people just have a bad day.
Yeah, that's a good point. Sometimes you need to give sometimes the people the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
I know doing weather is just one part of your business because you have to be out in the community, and I'm sure you go to talk to young kids at schools. That must be pretty interesting.
That's actually a lot of fun. It's one of my favorite things. We have to do so many public appearances, and sometimes we do them as a whole, like as a whole station. We all make them like the book festivals and stuff like that. And then we all do our own individual things. And that's one of the big ones that I do is I get asked to come talk weather, do a weather unit, or with all different ages. I've done from the youngest elementary all the way up through the universities, pilot training. And it's just a lot of fun because I'd say the smallest kids are the funnest, and they really make you get back to the beginning roots of weather, things that you haven't thought about in years, like, why is the sky blue? And I'm like, oh my God, such a great
I
question.
often wonder that myself, I guess.
So it's literally, it's a fun time, and just being asked is also kind of cool. Or when you have that person come up to you and say, man, you really saved me today. I thought it was going to be this, and if I hadn't watched your last weather hit, I would have ran into this or that, and that's very rewarding.
Well, and sometimes I'm sure that a child you may spark an interest or a little flame in them when you talk to them, and maybe that gives them the edge to say, maybe that's what I want to do. If somebody's pretty young and say they want to become a meteorologist, to prepare for that in, say, high school before you get to college, what kind of classes would you suggest they concentrate on?
The classes are pretty standard if you decide you want to become a meteorologist or a climatologist. And then they're different but standard if it's something you want to do where you're working like with the National Weather Service versus if you want to be a broadcast meteorologist. It's a different program.
Well, is there like a lot of math involved? I'm sure there's geography involved, that kind of stuff.
Absolutely, and
Yeah.
that's the one thing I didn't know, and I'm glad I didn't.
Yeah. Oh.
I did not realize the amount of math. I knew there was a lot of science, but I didn't know that there was a lot of math, and I'm awful at it. So I even had to get a tutor into my second year, which I'm glad I didn't know, because once I got that far, I'm one of those people where I will finish everything. I'm not a quitter, and so I'm glad I didn't know that in the beginning, because I probably would have been like, thermodynamic meteorology. I can barely say it, let alone do it.
Certainly
What is
couldn't
that?
spell it.
Right. I can now, but I'm still a little. So, but I got through it, and I'm glad that I did. But yes, it is a lot of math. It's a lot of science. But it's like anything else that you have to learn that you know you're never going to use again for the rest of your life. And as a broadcast meteorologist, I don't use a lot of that. But if like all of my weather instruments go out and I really had to,
Right.
then it's just like anything else. That's why you have to learn this stuff.
It just occurred to me, when you go places, whether it's in the United States or out of the country, do you find yourself watching other meteorologists on TV and kind of
Yes,
comparing
of
yourself?
course.
Do you?
It's not in my mind that I'm going to do that when I
Right,
get there.
right.
But if we are, in our room at night and it is a place that has a local meteorologist and it happens,
Yeah.
we happen to be watching TV, like I don't go out of my way to do it, but I will 100% focus. And it isn't even so much on that person as it is their weather, how they do it, how they broadcast it, how they relay it, just to see the differences between what I do where I am and what they do where they are.
Do you comment how snarky their outfit looks and what their hair looks like?
Not at all. I may be thinking it, but
Right.
I certainly wouldn't say it.
Well, we hope you've gotten to know April Madison a little bit better. If you live on the far north side of Tucson, she's your neighbor. She is the KGUN 9 morning meteorologist. She gives you your 7-day forecast and all other weather things related to it as well every morning, Monday through Friday. April, thanks so much.
Of course, this was a lot of fun. Appreciate it.